Okay, we're going to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff to have a really cool prototype preview from the brand Borealis. They were founded back in 2013. They're a micro brand with vintage aesthetics, focusing on updating classics of the past while taking advantage of today's modern manufacturing improvements. In terms of the type of watch, I'd consider this an everyday watch. Some key characteristics in design, when you're looking for something that you can wear every day, of course, you're just going to want that versatile blend of both sporty and dressy attributes. This is their Lusitano, and this is the Salmon dial prototype. So this is not the fully finished model. Hopefully I do get my hands on a future production unit, but this is a retro inspired everyday piece. I think really dials in to that particular period. It definitely gives me a lot of different vibes. I would say leaning more towards Omega, but the nice thing is not so close to where you're thinking that this is an homage or a direct homage of any type. You can get these for $310 on pre-order, yeah, it's pretty good. I think for what you get, you're getting something that is very, very cool. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so the dial itself is probably going to be one of the main points, is going to be, check that out. Look at that cool kind of meteor-like pie pan dial. I think it adds a lot of dimensionality and a lot of nice visual interest. It's in a very interesting salmon tone, definitely more vibrant than you'll see in a lot of places where I feel like typically salmon dials will kind of err on the side of being more subdued. This one is definitely very rich and very bright. So if you're into that, you're going to love this because it really doesn't hold back in that regard. Now, in terms of the dimensions, 39 millimeters in diameter, 12.5 millimeters thick, 47 millimeters lug to lug, stainless steel, nice box domed sapphire with an inner AR coating there. So you're going to see still quite legible even at very harsh angles because the distortion is only going to be pushed at the very edges of that crystal. You're going to get, of course, a nicely, I think, balanced and proportioned bezel, fully polished with a nice little kind of chamfer shape to it there, which is going to pick up light and reflect it in a lot of different ways. And of course, reflecting off of a dark room and, a dark camera lens, you're going to get a lot more darkness. But, I would say out in the wild, out in a blue sky, you're going to see this really take a little bit more shape under more normal lighting conditions. The crown is a push-pull crown, and you can see I can wind it at this position because it's not a screw-down crown. The movement inside, although you can't see it underneath this screw-down case back, is actually a Miyota 8315, which does offer hacking feature, which is nice. Also, these offer an extended power reserve at 60 hours, still beating at 3 hertz though, so that's going to be 21,600 vibrations per hour in terms of the beat rate. Of course, the winding action isn't going to feel quite as robust as some other competitors out there, but also this is a pre-production prototype, so I mean there's going to be a couple of things on here that will be refined, I'm sure, by the time of release. So some of the little sharper edges here and there are going to be better finished, of course. Now, the dial, I really do enjoy. Check that out. Textured, applied indices, polished hands. The lume, as far as I know, is unspecified, and it is only loomed on the hour and minute hands there. So you're going to be kind of more so needing to rely on the general orientation. And again, this is more of an everyday piece, airing more on the dressy side. So this isn't a diver. This isn't some, super dedicated sports watch. I think it's just a great everyday watch. Maybe it feels a little bit sportier because it is on this great beads of rice bracelet, 22 millimeter lug width, guys, solid beads of rice bracelet that tapers down to 18 millimeters. You have this Omega style clasp with a diver's extension and 6 bots of toolless micro adjust. So it's going to look quite robust. In terms of this particular unit here, this pre-production prototype, I'd say the detent on the extension is not not as robust as I would like it. But again, pre-production prototype, so you can see it's just going to kind of be able to come out with very little force. I'd like for it to feel a little bit more purposeful in the force. But the nice thing is you guys do have, of course, if you push the button, you get that toolless micro adjust. This isn't my favorite design, even when Omega does it, just because of this right here. When you adjust this all the way out, you kind of have something that breaks up the visual continuity of the bracelet itself. Of course, while you're wearing it, you're not going to see that because it's going to be on your wrist, and really no one's going to notice that. It's more of something, for somebody like me who reviews watches all the time, it's more of a nitpick. And Zelos has used this style of clasp a bunch of times as well, and yeah, I give that same feedback even when I'm reviewing a Planet Ocean that has this type of clasp. I will say though, the fit and finish and how serious and how nice this feels definitely conveys, fully milled and beautifully contoured and everything like that. Like, that's great. Just for me, design wise, that extension isn't the most useful, especially if you're going to be using that as micro adjust and then you extend out and then you kind of have that visual break. And then in this particular case of this exact unit, again, I can't speak for the production units, but hopefully Borealis sent another one my way once these are ready for production. It could use definitely a stronger detent there, keeping that from snapping out. But while it's on, it's not like it's going to snap out or anything like that. But speaking about having it on, let's go ahead and get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears really great. And of course, although my wrist is a little bit on the larger side of average at 7.5 inches, you can see it's also quite round. So it's not like I have this, wide, flat, super accommodating wrist. I'm definitely somebody who still has to pay attention to other dimensions and other diameters when it comes to how well a watch will fit. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens here, you're going to get some perspective distortion, and it's going to appear much larger than it actually is. Look at that. That just looks much bigger. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low here, and then just tighten up the frame so that you guys can get, still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a true aspect ratio. Look how much better that sits now centered on my wrist. Same wrist, same watch, but just because of the way the lens is going to react is going to, change the impression on the screen you're watching this on. So really nice, guys. Look at the way that sits. And of course, the detent on that diver's extension really doesn't do anything once this is locked in. So one thing not to worry about. You guys can see this thing really oozes a feeling of quality. It has great details in terms of the way the design flows together. It all comes together really nicely, guys. I dig that. It's one of those things. You can have good specs on paper, but if it's not well executed in fit and finish, and then of course thematically, if the design cues don't come together, then it doesn't always resonate. But I will say thematically, the design cues here come together in a really nice way. And although this dial, at least for me, in person, it's a little bit brighter than a typical Salmon dial I'd be looking for. I'd say this is in person a little bit more on the orange side than it's probably going to render in video. It still looks good. It still looks really good. I wish it just was a little bit paler, so maybe something more indicative of how it looks with a little bit more light reflecting off of it would, for me anyway, cement it. But I mean, for some folks, they're looking for something that's going to have a little bit more of that kind of orangey peach tone because it is very different and just something you don't see every day. So with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set it for some Lume shots, the light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, as you guys can see, nice Lume. It looks like BGW9 on the handset, but again, you're not going to necessarily. But I mean, look, even in this kind of semi-darkness here, not completely pitch black, you can actually see the reflections off of some of those really nice indices. And if I add a little bit of low light here, guys, because it's one thing to, of course, show this under studio lighting, but at the end of the day, you're not always going to be in perfect studio lighting or out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting, guys. So you guys can see still very legible, you know, because of that dial. Look at the way that micro texturing plays, though. That's probably my favorite part about this watch. Look at that. Very, very cool. And you can see this dial does play with the light. It's going to go in between different shades of very orange into peaches, into more of kind of what you would expect from a salmon dial, pale pink. And then it's just gonna, yeah, it's a good looking watch. I mean, then of course you have all the bling effect of that beads of rice style bracelet. I think it's just a really clean aesthetic and still, again, quite legible. And even if I get under harsher lighting situations here that typically could expose any types of production defects, you're just going to see actually some pretty nice finishing there. Look at the way the light just uniformly glides over that brushing. And again, this isn't some luxury timepiece, but honestly, a lot of the watches it's inspired by might have a luxury name attached to them, but for the time, the robustness and the level of finishing, and then especially after, a long time, years and years later, aren't even going to be finished quite this good or as, quite as, I would say, robust feeling in terms of the water resistance, right? You might be thinking, 50 meters isn't a lot of water resistance, but you know what? 50 meters on a brand new watch, it feels a lot more confidence inspiring than 50 meters on a vintage watch, right? Which this kind of is going to be able to supplement for a lot of folks. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into some closing thoughts on the wrist, guys. Classic proportions. This does wear really well. Design elements mesh together nicely. Like I said, there's a level of cohesion in design, which I can appreciate. Apart from the clasp being just a touch on the larger side versus the case proportions, I would say, that's probably the only thing that didn't mesh too perfectly, but I still think it works completely fine. Now, in terms of model variants, definitely check the site links for current options and availability. Now, in terms of comparable models, while 50 meters water resistant, it isn't quite enough to call this a full-on, go anywhere, do anything type of watch. It is still nice to see, a versatile piece like this on a metal bracelet with a dressier aesthetic. Also, the price point does keep it on that kind of value-rich side versus competitors that might be more specialized in either more sporty or dressy attributes, right? Like there's going to be sportier watches than this, and that's fair. And there's going to be watches that are dressier than this. But in terms of that little blend there, I think that's where it kind of hits its sweet spot, right, and hits its stride. So for me, guys, bottom line, there's a lot to like here, as with most Borealis watches. The Lusitano definitely, I'd say it gives you a touch less kind of direct homage vibes that we're kind of used to seeing from Borealis. I think it's kind of refreshing for the brand to see that. So, don't let my observations convince you either way, but I'm definitely excited to see what the production units turn out like, just because I think this one actually has a lot of potential. I would love to see future iterations of this come out over time, but let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like, and if you're not already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.